Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I am very honored to be doing a very special space champion, Dr. Jennifer Stern. Dr. Stern is a space scientist at NASA Goddard Spaceflight Center, specializing in the study of the chemistry of the atmosphere and surface of Mars, and instrument development for geochemical measurements on planetary surfaces. Dr. Stern has a BA in Geology-Biology from Brown University and a PhD in Geochemistry from Florida State University. She decided to apply her interest in geochemistry to astrobiology as a postdoctoral fellow at NASA Ames Research Center and NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, where she studied how organic molecules can be formed by non-biological processes occurring in meteorites and other hydrothermal vents. She is also a member of the science team for the Mars Science Laboratory rover Curiosity and sample analysis at Mars Instrument Suite. Dr. Stern runs the Stable Isotope Facility in the Planetary Environments Laboratory, where she studies the carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen isotope and systematics of terrestrial and laboratory planetary analogs of Mars and Titan. I'm so excited to be able to understand Dr. Stern's research further, as well as her journey of what really inspired her to come into the space industry. Welcome, Dr. Stern. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to inspire the future generation.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, before we get into understanding your journey of what led you into the industry, could you tell us more of your typical day? How does it run?
So it's a little different now that we've had COVID changing everything. I've been working from home a lot more than I ever used to. But that's okay, because even though I run a lab at work, there's still many things that have to be done, and many things that can be done over Zoom and a lot of writing. But on a given day, if I'm in the lab, I have several complex instrument suites. They're mass spectrometers, and they all have front ends that basically transform either liquids or solids into gases, or they concentrate gases for analysis. So sometimes I'll be in there maintaining the instruments, or usually I have people who work with me who also help do that. So I may be giving them instructions, or coming in and checking on what they're doing. I have a lot of meetings. I'm working on lots of different projects. And so, and a lot of times we work with people actually all over the world. We have some colleagues in France that we work very closely with in terms of both designing instruments for spaceflight, and then also for analyzing the data that has come down from, for example, the sample analysis at Mars Suite, which is on Mars right now as part of the Curiosity rover. So a lot of meetings are focused on talking about what projects we are going to propose to do and starting to formulate the plans for those projects. And then there are a lot of projects that we are already underway, that we're already perhaps building an instrument for, that we have to meet and discuss and share plans or drawings, etc. So it's a lot of different stuff. Sometimes I get to go into the field. A lot of the proposals I'm writing right now are to go in the field to different environments that are in some way Mars or even Europa-like. And this could be in the Arctic. There are Mars analog environments, as we call them, in the Atacama Desert in Chile. They're in Mexico in caves. So there's a lot of different places on Earth that you can go and do research in the field that are similar in some way to another planetary system.
Wow, it sounds like you're part of so many research experiences, as well as like some exciting future research. I think analog missions are extremely fun, and you get that real world, like the real experience of what it would be like if you were on a different planet. So it's definitely exciting to see the amazing groundbreaking research that can be found from those experiments. I also was reading how you were particularly interested in whether Mars had ever had a nitrogen cycle and how we might look at those through the analogs that you were mentioning. Could you explain to us a little bit more about this?
Sure. Well, on Mars, we've discovered that there is nitrate, which is basically the form of nitrogen that's in fertilizers that's so readily available to organisms. And in the case of fertilizers, it's plants that are taking up the nitrogen as a nutrient through the nitrate, and then using it to grow. And so that the presence of nitrate on Mars has some really interesting implications for the potential for biology on Mars, both past and present. And so there are places on the Earth that are somehow Mars-like, in which nitrate behaves the same way it does on Mars. So nitrate's very soluble. So in places where there's a lot of rainfall, or just like here in the Washington, D.C. area, most nitrate is actually going to be in the waters. So it's soluble, it's dissolved, it's in the waters. But in places like the Atacama Desert and the dry valleys of Antarctica and other deserts, it actually settles to the surface. And it does not, because there's not a lot of running water, it doesn't get picked up. It just sort of sits there. So those are some places that we can go to understand how organisms may be able to access that nitrate that's just sitting on the surface. And what does that look like? What does that cycling look like?
Yeah, that's definitely very interesting to learn about. And, I was also reading how you were actually part of an analog mission at the Arctic for 4 field seasons. So could you share how that experience on that analog mission was?
Sure. So I actually went to two different projects in the Arctic. One was in Svalbard, Norway, Svalbard is an archipelago of islands north of the Arctic Circle. So it's actually not part of the main body of Norway. It's really remote. It's the farthest north I've ever been. It's about 80 or 81 degrees when we were actually on a boat. And there are some really interesting geological features there. You have basaltic volcanism, which is what we think, what we know is on Mars is basalt, and on the moon. But we have places on, this is one of the places on Earth where you have basically basaltic volcanism came up through water and through ice, and then you had precipitation of carbonates. So you had something, you end up with something, a rock that actually looks very similar to some of the Mars meteorites that we've seen. And so that environment was somewhere we wanted to go. And we took a lot of instruments that are actually used on the Curiosity rover. We took sort of the field versions of them so that we could use them in the field and try to understand what would we see if we only had those specific instruments, just like the rover would see. And then we also take samples home to back to the lab to do a real full characterization of those. So that was a really neat, exciting experience. And one year we actually stayed at a research center, a really research little town, because that's really all it was. It's the northernmost town. It's called Ny-Ålesund in the world. And I believe it's the northernmost place. It actually, you can send mail from, at least the northernmost place you can send mail from. So that was pretty neat. In the winter, there's only like 10 or 15 people there. And in the summer, it's much more busy. We were there in the summer. So, but it was light all the time because it was summer in the Arctic. The second year we went there, we were on a boat, a research vessel the whole time, which was really neat because we got to go to all these places that you just can't go to otherwise. And then the other project was in Greenland, and it was a little further south. So we got a tiny bit of darkness at night. Both of these were in summer. And that project, we were looking at methane cycling. Now, methane cycling is really exciting, interesting topic for global climate change, of course. And this is one of the places where what we study on Earth to understand another planet also helps us understand the really important things going on here on Earth, the way that methane is a greenhouse gas and is being released in greater quantities because of the thawing of permafrost. And so that's also a place where we can go and test our equipment that we want to use on Mars to measure methane on Mars, because methane's really interesting in the context of planetary exploration, because on Earth, most methane is biologically produced. And there is some that's geologically produced, but on Earth, most of it's biology. So when we see a very small amount on Mars, we are very interested because it could be biological or it could be geological. So we want to understand it better.
Yeah, the science is so exciting and intriguing because there's just so much unknown. And when you were describing, I was
Mhm.
just so excited. I was like, I want to learn more about it. So definitely, I can see that there's so much potential and so many applications to also understanding about different planets helping us here on Earth. I know a lot of times people always ask the question of why invest in space, but a lot of people don't realize that investing in space is also investing in our planet. And so definitely, I can see the applications running in both sides. And additionally, your experience to the analog mission sounded really, really fun. I could see like your smile lit up whenever you talked about it. So definitely seemed like an amazing experience. And so I'm going to ask you probably the really tough question for any scientist, which is if you had to pick one project that you have worked on, what is the most exciting one? And could you tell us more about
I mean, that is a hard question
it?
for many reasons, but I think the most exciting opportunity that I've had has been to be a part of the Curiosity team. Um, and this is because it's such a, you know, we have comparatively a lot of missions going to Mars compared to other places, but there's still very few opportunities as a scientist to be involved in an active mission. So coming to NASA when I did, we were just finishing the development and the construction of the instrument that we were going to put on Curiosity. So I got to sort of see the wrap up of that, and then got to go to the launch out of Cape Canaveral of Curiosity, and then be a part of all of when we first landed, I went out to the Jet Propulsion Lab, and I was part of the team of scientists that just analyzed all the initial information that came in over those I was there back and forth over those first 90 days with the rest of my team. And so that was just a really amazing experience to come in to sort of the control center and see these pictures of Mars that no one else has ever seen come down, at the beginning of the day. And then to receive information from this instrument that I was a part of, a very tiny part of, involved in the testing of, was really exciting. And that mission, so that was in 2012, but we're still there on Mars. We're still making measurements. We have some company with the Perseverance rover, but we're still there, and it continues to be exciting. Although I work on a lot of other things now. I would still say that the most exciting thing I've been involved in has been the Curiosity work.
Yeah, whenever NASA posts a new picture of an image that a rover captured on Mars, I know everyone is really excited to see what the surface is more like, just to understand more details. So definitely, I could agree that sounds like an amazing experience to be a part of. And so, diving a little bit away from your research and learning more about your journey, I'm curious, how did you get into geology and biology and combine those two interests to get into space? Were you always interested on it, on this topic as a little girl, or did you kind of get into it in college?
So I was interested not necessarily in space at all, but growing up, I loved being outside and I loved mountains. And I would go skiing with my parents in the Rockies. And I remember seeing just the landscape and wanting to understand why it looks like that. Why do those mountains look so different than the Appalachian Mountains on the East Coast? So, and then also looking at artwork of other places that show other kinds of landforms, like the karst topography of China. There are all these, beautiful paintings of these landforms that are sort of just nothing that we see here in the U.S. And so I always had a curiosity about those things. And when I went to college, I sort of always thought I wanted to study geology, and started taking classes. And I actually for a little while, I was not sure if that's what I really wanted. And I thought I was going to take some time off, although I didn't. I thought I had some interest in art history and some other things, but ultimately I came back to geology. And what sort of reeled me back in was a class called, it was called the fossil record, but it would be called Earth Systems History, where you're learning about how ice cores and sediment cores hold information about the past, about past climate, past environments, et cetera. And so that really sort of reeled me in and got me excited again about learning how rocks record information about, it's essentially, environment and biology. So that's sort of where the biology came in. And at Brown University, they have, in geology, you can study geological sciences, or you can study geochemistry, geophysics, or geobio. And so I chose to do geobio because of those interests. And then when I got to grad school, which at the time I was actually studying coastal geology, and I was really interested in sort of how the modern coastlines respond to things like climate change, and what we do as humans to try to shore up our coastline to protect against hurricanes, etc. But through taking some other classes, I got really interested again in some other topics, which were stable isotopes. And this goes back to isotopes are used to understand cycling of biological and geological materials. And so I got very interested in that, which took me over more to the chemistry side. And so my PhD work, though, was nothing space related. It was about, I was looking at how to prevent methane emissions from landfills using compost, basically. I looked at how carbon cycles in the Everglades. I looked at phosphorus in the Everglades, and I looked at how trace metals interact with organic species in water. So things that are, do not seem very space related, but it actually turns out that all of those, everything I learned, you can apply to looking for signs of biological processes and geological processes on other planets. So I was able to find a NASA postdoctoral opportunity that I could apply to sort of take what I knew about isotopes and geochemistry and apply it to space. And that's sort of how it happened.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of students at a younger age, like high school, for example, don't know how much space really relates to different science topics they learn, or, just really anything. You can have any career in space. So I'm curious, how did you find that intersection? Was there like an article you were reading or a teacher who told you about it? But like, what really was that moment where you like, whoa, this would be so cool to apply into the space industry?
That's a good question. We took, as a grad student, we had these seminar classes. And one of the seminars, if I recall correctly, was about just using geochemistry to study both the early Earth, which is related in a lot of ways to other planets, because we, for example, the question of life, when did life start on Earth, is very linked to, did life start on other planets? Because you're sort of looking at really old rocks, and you're trying to understand how chemistry evolved over time and how rocks record chemistry. So through the seminar, we had to read papers and report on them. And I kept finding all these interesting papers where they used stable isotopes to, for example, try to understand the first evidence of life on Earth, to understand, and to look for other signs of life on other planets. And actually at the time, this was right after there was in the late 90s, there was this excitement because there was the thought that life had been found in a Mars meteorite. Now, we don't believe that this is actually the case, but it was a really exciting time for the field of what's now known as astrobiology, which is, scientists who use from all different branches of science, who use their expertise to try to understand whether life could exist on other planets. So I think it was a combination of just what was happening at the time and of that seminar series that made me realize, oh, wow, this is a different, really exciting direction that I could go in.
Yeah, that's what I love about actually the private commercial launches that are happening to space. I think it brings a lot of traction into the space industry with like SpaceX or Virgin Galactic. I feel like a lot of companies are starting to bring to light to like the general public of how much space is really accessible to everyone, more than we realize. And I feel like that traction will help younger students be like, whoa, space is so cool. And so definitely the excitement is something that it's exciting what's going to happen in the future. So I'm curious, in your journey, did you have some obstacles or twists and turns that kind of changed the direction of your path that led you to who you are today?
Certainly, I think everybody does. There were times when I would get frustrated in undergrad and I thought I wanted to study other things. And then, like I said, I found a class that really got me excited. It's also just hard being in grad school because you're not earning money. You're just going to school, and you also it's normal also to have doubts and to come up against really hard. You can have personality problems with your advisor. You can have. I mean, I switched advisors a bunch of times for various reasons, and it took a while to sometimes you really have to trust yourself to know what's good for you and what's going to help you. And a lot of times when you're just coming up, you think, oh, all these people who already have their PhDs and are already professors, they know better than me, I should just listen to them. But a lot of times you also, they don't know you, they don't know exactly what you're going through. So I made a couple of switches in the projects I was doing and the work I was doing and the direction I was focused, that ended up being the right decisions. But it's just about learning how to trust yourself. And I mean, I left one postdoc at NASA Ames to come over to NASA Goddard, and because things were not going well, but it was the best decision I ever made. And from all of those experiences, I believe something good can come. It's okay to learn that you don't like or don't want something. As long as you act on it, it will put you in a different direction, and that's a better direction.
I'm really glad you gave that advice of not only sharing your obstacle, but like trusting yourself, and and that's how you overcame your obstacle. I think a lot of times we hear people being like, super amazing, they accomplished a lot, but we don't actually see what helped them overcome their obstacles that they did have. And so knowing to trust yourself, and sometimes it can be hard when there's so many other people saying various other things, but just remembering what you need is really important. So thank you for sharing that advice with us.
Sure. And it's also important to find your mentors who also sort of encourage you to trust yourself. That's really important too.
Yeah, of course. And, I'm also like, I ask this question to everybody who comes onto this interview, and it's really exciting to hear the different opinions. So I'm curious to hear what excites you and what makes you nervous about the future of the space industry or the geology aspect.
So I think it's very exciting that we have all these commercial entities getting involved in space. I think it's encouraging, maybe more people to get involved in space careers and to choose space as something that they want to study. The only thing as a scientist that I am very mindful of is that we respect our targets. So for example, if we go to Mars, we have to be very careful that we are not bringing forward contamination. So, for those who believe that we should move to Mars and live there, that is going to definitely have an impact on the planet. And that needs to be thoroughly considered and understood before these decisions are made. And that is something that NASA takes very seriously, and so does the international community. So I think that progress can definitely be made. I think communication is really important between all of the stakeholders, because we certainly have not. There's a lot left to study on Mars and the moon. We can't assume that we know everything, and so before we go and for example put our own biological imprint in these places, let's make sure that we have ways to manage our impact so that we can still benefit in making discoveries that we can trust are really we're looking at what's actually native to the planet and not something we brought.
Yeah, of course. I mean, 10 years ago, seeing the progress we made in just a decade, and a decade from now, how much progress is going to be made, being sure that we're not, impacting the environment too much, even the space environment. Like, I know everyone's talking about the space debris that's out there, just trying to be mindful of everything and making sure we're not impacting the beauty of space is also something that we have to take into consideration. So thank you for bringing that point up. And so my last and final question for you is, what final piece of advice do you have for young students regarding their pursuit of a passion in the STEM field or space industry, something that you wish someone told you when you were in high school or maybe college?
Probably just that it's okay to change your mind about what you want to study. It's okay to invest a lot of time in one topic and then decide that you want to apply your knowledge to another topic, because even if it's not a straight line, you're still taking what you learned from all of the investment of your time and those classes and that research and that work. It's okay to, it's also, I know quitting is a bad word, but you know what? Sometimes you need a change, and you might need to quit one project or one job that's not doing what it needs to do for you in order to go on to something better. And so I think reframing some of the way that we think about success is really important, because it allows you to continue to move forward and see things as stepping stones and not as failures.
Wow, yeah, that is definitely amazing advice. I think a lot of times it's like students, we get really caught up and are like, oh, I already registered for this path. I'm going to go to this track. And we just get stuck up in that. But remembering that it's okay, you should embrace change. And that's something that we should be mindful of. It's just advice I think that sometimes we all need to hear. So thank you so much, Dr. Stern, for taking your time to share your amazing research as well as your journey with us. It's truly inspiring to see how there's not like one track to come into the space industry, and how you did change your mind and found that there's so many correlations between geology and space, and you combine them together. Space is very interdisciplinary, so thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing that with us.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity.